really thinking about the vision. Okay, there it goes. The vision planning for like, what do we want to do with Mote? And I want to frame it this way because I think this will be, you know, the goals that we think of now, you know, of course they can change, but this will be what we keep to as we go when we think about what are the important things for us to be working on right now. Where are the places we could get help from other people? Where are the places that we want to focus our time as the developers? So I don't know if I know that Akash said he had some notes and questions pinned down. I have some ideas too, but before I put those out there, I'll see if any of you all have ideas of what do you want to do with Mote, or what's interesting, or what's something you would really like to see done with the project?
Get it fully on Python 3. That's my goal.
Yeah, that is something to start with. And if I take a look at the checklist that I have, the first thing would be to convert this website project into a web application project. To get such kind of polish to call it an application rather than a website. That would be something to start with. But there are certain things to do, like there's compliance issue with the code. We can make it PEP8 compliant, and there's obviously a scope for making the user experience better and responsive over the board. Also, we have responsive issue. I mean, these are small issue, but if we culminate them all, it all becomes a big pile of, and that most of the users who are browsing the internet are doing so from the mobile phones, right? So responsiveness is what I believe it should be a big issue over here, and the utility of it all. That means we don't have to, refresh the entire DOM. Instead of that, we'll just fetch the stuff asynchronously from the background, and when it gets loaded up, it will just render it on the screen. So certain small improvements like that, if we put them all together, we'll find that Mote has become something really different and hopefully a much better version of itself as compared to what it is right now. So that's what I think Mote should end up by the end, or by the improvements that we will bring down the line. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think the mobile responsiveness is a really important goal, because this app was written, I think originally written in like 2013, 14, and a lot in the world has changed since then in terms of how we connect online and get access the internet. So I definitely think that's something that I also share. Before I put out my wish, Ramya, do you have anything? I know you've just kind of been looking at it and you haven't worked with Flask before, but is there anything that you're interested in or you'd like to get out of this project, or is it really just kind of the experience of working on a web application?
So I want to get everything out of it. So because I'm a clean slate, whatever I'm doing now is like a benefit for me. So I'm going to get everything out of it.
Got it. Cool. That's kind of the boat I'm into. So the one thing I'm going to add to that list, and if I am taking notes in the Etherpad as well with some of the ideas. The one thing I'm going to add to that list is a fully automated deploy. So that way, once we do all this hard work, because one experience I had, which was I worked on the Fedora Happiness Packets project, and which is a Django project, and there's a little more moving pieces to that than there was Mote. However, the thing was we did a bunch of front-end improvements and we got it running. It looked really great locally and it worked really well in our developer environment. And then we tried to get it to production. Well, A, we ran out of time in the internship, but really B, it was just we didn't have an idea of how we wanted to automate it and actually get new versions to production. So as a result, we've had a lot of like updated code that should be working fine that just isn't running in production. So I definitely want that to be that's one place I'll be thinking about is fully automated deployment for new updates. So that's also where more of my experience is, coming from more of the DevOps ops background. I don't have as much front-end development. I have hardly any front-end development experience. So I'll definitely be leaning more on some of you for that. But I think that's going to be a good place to start. Like, I think these 4 things that we have are really excellent goals for maybe the next 3 months. Like, just thinking, or the next, we'll see how it goes in the next 3 months, but try to frame it within that. So I guess at a high level, the goals will be, and maybe let me ask. So Nasir, did you see the pull requests from Zbigniew in Mote that got merged? I guess it was like a week or 2 ago. I was just wondering if there's what is left for Python 3 support after that Python 3 pull request got merged. Do you know?
I'm not sure on the internals because only for yesterday I did the version bumping and most of the things went well except for one if condition that the PyFlakes was making a warning about. It was about some reload function that was in the Python 2 standard library, but not in the third one. So that will be something to look out. That's something pretty minor. I'm gonna get that in a few seconds, so it will be pretty minor thing. Or else, like, if I would see something, I'm gonna create an issue and we can discuss it. Other than that, with the DevOps side of things, I wanted to actually work on Ansible, and I'm actually working on the Badger, the new Badger's backend and on its uh, OpenShift template to get it into CommuniShift if that instance is up. So I think we could do something similar for Moat, or else we can write something for Ansible, and it will provision the EC2 instance or any Fedora instance, and we can host Moat there as well, as Justin suggested earlier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think that'll make a good end goal. I don't know where CommuniShift deployment is, and because there's legal issues with that, I just definitely want to make sure that we don't depend on that route too much. But I know that Fedora Infra is happy to spin up, like, for community apps in the meantime, an AWS EC2 instance or something, some cloud infrastructure that we can use short term until whatever happens with CommuniShift gets figured out. Which, maybe for context, CommuniShift is a community OpenShift platform that the Fedora infrastructure team had planned to launch to replace what existed before that, which was basically virtual machines for Fedora apps. So this was supposed to be a whole modern experience for deploying community apps. But then we had GDPR concerns with data, and that's why that issue has been on the icebox for the CommuniShift for so long. So that's why it's a good idea to not depend too much on that, but we have options, and I'm definitely keen on probably using Ansible because that's something that's very familiar. People in Fedora are generally familiar with, which also means it might be easier to bring people in on that stuff. But we'll probably start focusing more on the deployment side once all of us are running, once we all have clean documentation on setting up a development environment and we all have it running locally, which I think we're almost there. I don't but that's where I think probably, like, after this first month, maybe after 1 or 2 sprints of doing development, then maybe we'll shift gears to really start thinking about deployment earlier than later. So I also just put a link to Zbignew's Python 3 pull request just to make sure that you have that pulled down. This already got merged, but just want to make sure you've seen that. Okay, so there's maybe just following up on final changes for Python 3. I'm looking back at the notes doc. So that's one major goal is full Python 3 support. The second one is really, maybe this one fits in with the mobile responsiveness, but making Mote a really modern web app with a proper front end and back end component, which really is about, I think the number one benefit is mobile responsiveness to me, but doing that will also make it a speedier interface and easier to update the interface too, than the way things are now. And then the last piece will be the fully automated deployment, figuring out how we take this and get it running on the internet. Of course, there'll be more specific details under each of those, but this is just kind of a high level vision. Where do we want to go? Does that all seem to make sense in alignment with what you're seeing too?
Justin, I would like to add one more thing. It might not be a very big factor, but it would kind of help the developers down the line. That is the compliance of the code that we're typing. So for Python code, we have
Compliance with, I missed that. The
compliance with
mic broke up.
EP8, like we have linting in the
PEP8, yep.
pipeline. Yeah. So, if we kind of deploy this on the pipeline itself, and we have these checks for whoever makes the push, whoever makes the pull request, then it's going to make sure that all the checks which are going to happen is automated. We won't have to go back to some, disorganized code. Let's just say organize it in the first place and then use that as a base and build stuff upon it. So that can be one thing we would want to work upon. That can be helpful for developers, but not so much on the user side who will be using it. What do you think, guys?
Akashdeep, for that, I was thinking if we could set up something like pre-commit hooks, where when anyone's committing before that, we could add a check for black, the code formatter for Python,
Right,
and we can like set the same thing for something like a review tool like Cider that we use internally, and like set the same thing in CI, that the CI checks if our code is in compliance with black, and whenever some code is pushed that is not in compliance, it will fail. So we can, if it's about the contributor experience, I think black and PyFlakes, we have PyFlakes
Fireplace.
enabled
Yeah,
by default. We can add black as well, and we would have to like let PyFlakes know that these are some errors and warnings that you have to ignore, because like as you know, Papiate and black don't go hand by hand.
right.
So it will be something that we can look into for that sort of things. What do you think, Remy and Justin?
Maybe for quick context, so the first part, the PEP8, that's a Python coding standard that really isn't about, it's really not technical, but it's more about how you format and present your code. So it's written in a
Right.
standard way. And then Black is another tool that sort of follows PEP8. It has a couple of other different opinions that break with PEP8, but it's a tool that will actually do that formatting for you and do all of that work. So I think for my side, I added a new item to our goals list, which is really important, I think. Continuous integration testing. We could actually integrate that later on with how we deploy the application and integrate it with Git, which would be really cool. But short term, I think it would just be cool to set up something that gives you quick feedback on your changes. We already have a Travis CI test suite that sort of does that runs the existing test suite. But it would be cool to maybe expand that, look at formatting options, things that would make it easier for us to review changes and work with lots of different people who might have different experiences of working on Python applications at different companies or organizations, what have you. So that's actually something I think I'm probably more equipped to help with. So, and it's also something I'm more interested in. I know I probably won't be going too deep on the front end development side, but there'll be ways that we can all specialize and kind of choose what we want to work on over the next couple months with the project. So there'll always be chances to try something new and try something also that maybe you're already familiar with. But okay, I think those five goals, and I'll put them in bold in the Etherpad. I think those are going to be good things for us to start with. Maybe the next thing that we can do is split off into that last part, of the meeting agenda, which is, this would be looking at the backlog. And this is where we can actually start talking about what do we want to work on? What do we actually want to do? So I have that GitHub link I posted in the chat. And what I'm going to do as well is share my screen so we can all be looking at the board at the same time together. Can you see my screen? Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that we already have on here. I know Nasir has changes in progress to do the version bump to Flask. So that kind of falls out of what we're going to be planning. The contributing guidelines, that's also important. I think that can probably stay there. And I think the rest of these, we can actually start thinking about where do we want to start. And of course, there might be issues that we might want to add here that are not yet open. That's always an option too. But the way this project board has worked for, maybe I can just give an overview of how I use this kind of project board style for other projects like the Tele IRC project. This is just to give an idea of what these project boards can look like once you start to use them. So for Tele IRC, we have a 6-column board with our sprints. So the done column is anything that we've accomplished in the current sprint that has been done this sprint. In progress, self-explanatory, current sprint. These are things that we're working on in 2-week intervals. The Tele IRC team decided that 2 weeks worked well for us, so that we'll try to group our issues and our tasks together to be completed in 2-week windows. So these are the things that we have ongoing for our current sprint. We have some idea of the things that we knew that this next sprint, we want to focus on unit tests for the project. So we've got some of our unit test issues that we know are coming up. Waiting on external, that's going to be if we're waiting on like an upstream project or we're waiting on some other action in another issue. We can't work on it yet. That's what those are. And then backlog is pretty universal. All the things that, all the ideas, all the things you could do but are not currently planned yet. So they have a similar structure with that. A little, there's a couple columns that are missing, but we can start simple. So I think what we could do is first figure out, I think we talked about doing 2-week sprints before, maybe just confirming if that's how we want to start, start off with 2-week sprints as our interval, and then we can look at the backlog. But before I do that, does the 2-week interval, does that sound like something that's achievable, doable? Like, does that sound like a good place that we can start? I see thumbs up. Cool. In that case, then I think maybe Akash, do you want to talk about what was going? I guess would this be a good place, a good issue to start with, or have you already started working on the refactoring for this issue before we look at the backlog?
To start with, Justin, this issue is a long-term issue. The refactoring of it all, it has to deal with every single template pages that is present over there. So this issue can be broken down into multiple issues, each dealing with every single page that we want to work with. So I think we have somewhere around 11 template pages, each of which is static in nature as of now, but we want to make sure that there's no refreshing which kind of takes place. So we can kind of disintegrate this issue into 11 more issues, and then we can tackle them one by one. So that's what I think how we should proceed. And I've explained that part, that how the interactivity will be achieved. So it basically makes use of jQuery, but this thing has to be done for different functionalities that's going to happen in different pages. So let's start with the landing page. So what we have in the landing page is the meeting which just happened right now. So right now we have Jinja, which kind of pre-renders it for you. But if something goes again, a new event comes again, but you're not refreshing the page, it kind of stays right there, right? And we would not want that to happen, because if something has happened, it should get reflected automatically. We could use Ajax for that, and Ajax would actively synchronize with the site so that we'll get to know the most up-to-date information without actually needing to refresh the page over and over again. So that's just an example of how we can implement this in the landing page. And when it comes to the original chat page, we have this template for monotype fonts for factoring. We have this custom CSS, which kind of inputs out the IRC chats. So instead of having it rendered on the HTML page using Jinja and then serving it to the front end, which is kind of efficient, yes, but it requires a lot of refreshing. It requires a lot of reloading the DOM, so it kind of takes that immersion away. We can have something like this, that we know that this is the chat, and that is at the left-hand side, and we'll have that box which has that chat on the right side. So if I click on the list at the left side, I'll just click on one entry, and it won't be refreshing, it won't be loading up a new page, but rather it will be requesting the server that I need the chats for this meeting. and it will be requesting that as a JSON format. It's as a JSON document, and it will be rendered at the right-hand side at real time. So, different changes needs to be done, but for 11 pages, so I think we would want to create 11 different issues for each and every page.
Got it. So here's what I'm going to suggest to start. Do you know how to do the checklist feature in GitHub issues?
I do, Justin. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could just do step 1. Like for now, I think what'll be the best thing to do is just to fill out this checklist with what different templates need to be updated, and put those there. What I think we can build off of after that is, for say if we want to work on some of these in a sprint, we'll make a new issue for like 3 of the 11 or whatever makes sense for a sprint, and we'll make a new issue for that. I was going to point out one way that we can kind of use that issue as a meta issue. This is an example of another issue in another repository about writing docs that I had a long time ago, and it was a huge issue, but then I just, I tagged pull requests and did it this way as a kind of a way to keep tabs of it. I think that this will be a way from a project management point of view. I think it'll be easy if the action item for now is just to update the checklist with what DOM or what pages need to be converted to the JSON returns. And then, well, maybe we can do some of this right now. Is this something you think you'd want to work on for the next sprint? If we start working on, is this something that you think would be a good intro place to begin with if we choose some of the docs or some of the pages here?
I don't think it would be a good thing to start with, Justin, because first of all, we should start with modernizing the layout, making it all responsive in nature, the front-end part of it. This kind of comes at the back-end part of it. It has to talk to the server and fetch information. So I think we can have people working on it after a couple of sprints. Like it would be a month later, but that would be the right time to make this happen. But to start with it right now would not be the wise thing to do.
Okay, got it. Nasir, I saw you raised your hand. Did you want to add something?
So I would like to just add that it's a +1, like from my side, to keep it in the backlog, because like as we are not yet familiar with the integration between front end and back end, once we all get a little bit familiarity, I think it would be easier to turn all those calls into Ajax ones. So as long as we get familiar with that, we can work on that step by step, and I'll help collaborate with Akashdeep and Ramya to get it into Ajax calls. So that'll be a good idea to keep it in the backlog.
Okay, so I went ahead and moved it to the backlog then. And in that case, then we can go ahead and look at, so I think that should be on probably the bottom. Yeah, it's down there. So with that, we can start looking at some of the issues that are here. I think the way that we usually do it in Tela IRC is every sprint, we have at least one person assigned to an issue each sprint. So basically, there's just one task to complete for everyone each sprint. And then we kind of tie that together in the developer meeting. So like the future meetings, we'll probably be looking at pull requests or talking about how things are going, probably a little less on the planning side. But for now, I think the best place to start would be to look at the backlog and think about what things people want to take. I think these good first issues would probably be better ideas for things, even if it's us taking them. I think that's okay, because this is about the next couple weeks is really going to be about us getting familiar and comfortable with working on Mote. So maybe we could start, I just don't know what, there's a lot of good first issues. Okay. I'll pause there just in case before I start kind of reading these out and thinking about what kind of skills we have, where we want to focus. Has anyone already looked at this, and do you have a preference for something that you'd like to take on for this sprint before, or we can talk about it? But I just don't know if someone already had their eyes on something and really wanted to work on that.
So I think I just moved an issue to to backlog. That will be a good first issue as well. So it was actually about creating a container image for it, and I documented that. So if someone would like to get started with creating Docker files and like containerizing applications, I have documented the procedure on the issue, so it'll be good to get started with. And the other thing is the config.json thingy. I would like to work on that one because that's something that can cause some issues when you have mem cache disabled. So we can have mem cache enabled, but like this cache part needs to be figured out because on our local versions we don't have those files in the backend, so it kind of creates a 400 or 500 error for us to whenever we want to see some meetings. So as long once this cache part is figured out, I think we'll be good to uh, move on with developing other stuff. So I think that was the case with me. Was the same with Akashdeep and Ramya when you did set up that.
I agree with Nasir that cache part is indeed something that we would want to work on in a priority basis because I actually sat down to convert the pages into responsive and let's just say a better looking counterpart of them. But I was not able to proceed much further. I was only able to convert only one page of them because whenever I tried to see the functional prototype of that page, so this issue that Nasir kind of ticketed just like moments before I faced that issue. So that was turning up. So yeah, we would want to work that on first, and just because it documented the container image creation, Nasir, I would want to pick that up. I don't have much experience on this, but I think we can kind of use that as a learning experience as well as, you know, fulfill this task as well. So I'm kind of inclined to do that.
So Akashdeep, if you are willing to take the container one, feel free to ping me whenever you like to if you want some
Yeah,
pointers to get started with. Okay.
sure thing. I will.
So, Akash, is this one that you think you would like to work on for the current sprint, for trying to piece together a container image?
Yes, Nasir. Yes, Justin. Sorry. Yeah, I would like to
Got it.
have it assigned to me.
Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one to you. I'm going to remove the question label, and I'm going to put it on the to-do column. So there is a piece, just because Nasir is also working on the Flask bump, be prepared that that will probably impact the container image. But I think I don't know how much is left on porting to Flask. So I don't know if
It's
there's a lot
done.
of work there, or
It's
yeah,
done. Like
go
I
ahead.
was
Oh, it's done.
with my day job, I work on Django. So whenever we do these version porting and version bumping, a lot of things big. But with Flask, we were just using to serve that and some basic Flask functionality. So it's almost done. I'm gonna create a PR right after this meeting. So it's done.
Super. Okay, well, that's good to know then. So that one's almost done. That will probably unblock the container image, and we can start with, so Akash can start with this one. It'd be helpful if actually I had a front end back end filter. I should do that for a label, so it'd be easier to filter through these. So we have, I haven't looked in depth through the backlog, but we have some front end pieces that are here. I'm just trying to get an idea of what would be a really helpful thing to work on. I think this is a bug fix that would be helpful. It's just an easy fix bug fix. That might not be an issue. That might need to be retested. I feel like I'm missing a bunch of, oh, yeah, I am missing a bunch of issues. The reversing the order of the list might also be a good thing, which is more of a front end issue. Wrapping text is also a front end issue. What would be a back end issue? Probably this one. auto linking URLs in the summary and logs. Maybe this one as well. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of front end issues. So I opened some of these up. So all right, we got the container issue figured out. I showed that pull request. Oh no, that's different. So we have 5 issues that are here that I think would be good places for folks to start on, for things to work on over the next sprint. I'll put links to all these in the chat, but since Akash is working on the container images, I think it would be helpful for all of us if everyone would be able to take one of these issues for the next sprint. For my side, I might take one of these, but I won't be spending as much time writing code. I'm going to be more focused on the project management pieces, at least in the beginning. So I might not be as hands-on with the issues, but I'm just working on other things that aren't. I should probably start tracking in issues. So I put those out there. I think any of these issues would be a good place to start. I don't know if this person's still working on them. Nasir and Ramya, are any of these interesting, or would you like a chance to maybe after this meeting to look through them? I know normally we'll be a little speedier, I think, on figuring it out, but I know this is the first meeting and we're just getting started, so I don't know how much context you have.
So because I don't have much idea, I am thinking any good first easier issue for me. I don't know how difficult or easy any of these good first issues would be. If anyone can help me pick one, it would be great.
So I think there's one with the wrap text correctly in the log view. So
Okay.
would that be a good first issue for you? Because like it's using a CSS class, which is white space wrap on log display pre. So you would actually have to tweak some CSS classes, and that will be a good starting point. I think if you want to get familiar with the CSS and the front end part of it, the issue 62.
So whatever I start working on, I'll have to first do a lot of research behind what I have to do, and then start tackling the issue. So in my opinion, any of these would be the same because I have to do a lot of research in the background and then get started with it. So I think in my opinion, any of this would be the same for me. Anyway, I have to study anything that's new. So
Yeah, and the one thing that you and I also have to do, Ramya, is also get I don't know if you have already, but is actually just get a development environment working and running locally. That will make it a lot easier to kind of do real-time testing and tweaking while you're working on something like this. But
okay.
There are some clues here
Okay.
from 2015 that might be useful when you get to the CSS part. But I guess for you working on something, there's 2 pieces: is setting up the development environment and then actually working on the change.
Okay.
I think I agree with this here. I think this one would be a good place to start because it's not a huge task, and I think also setting up the in-dev environment would probably be enough for the 2 weeks at least to get your feet wet with the project.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I'll take this one.
Okay. All right. So I'll tag you on this one. I'll move it up from the backlog to do. Take off help wanted. And cool. So that should update here. Perfect. And Nasir, is there one that you are particularly interested in, or do you just want to have one randomly assigned? And you could work, as I know you've been working on a little more. This would be after the last one, but I don't know if there's something you'd like to follow up with, or if any old issue or bug will work.
Anything would work for me.
Okay. I was thinking this one has always bothered me, so that the newest ones always appear first in the, and this is Matthew Miller who opened this one. I think this would be a helpful one for a user interface. I don't know. Do you want to do something more front end, or do you want to do back end work? What do you prefer?
For next sprint, I could get this done. Along with that, I would actually prefer to working on the config.json file because once that's well, we could have a pretty smooth developer experience with it. Because like once the cache part is not there, you have a broken web application that is working on production but not on the development or the local development setup. So
Mm,
I think that will be something interesting to for me to work on for the next sprint. And if I would have time, I could get the reverse month and stuff done as well. That'll be pretty simple
okay.
as far as I can assume, but the config part is something that I would like to preferably work on.
Do we have an issue open for the config?
Yeah, I just moved that to backlog, so you'll find that. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Cool. So why don't we go ahead and make that one? If you have time to work on the reverse order, that's great. But we won't make that a hard requirement. I think starting with this one, I haven't had a chance to read through it yet, but it looks like it makes sense following up on modernizing. Yeah, with memcached. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I think this would be a good one to work on. So I can go ahead and tag you on this one, and it's in the to-do column. And then if you have extra time, I'll put a note in here. I won't assign this one to you, but I'll put a note in here that we talked about it. If you have time, you would like to work on it, but not critical. This will be the one we work on for this sprint. Cool. And then on my side, what I was going to do is I was going to take the contributing docs one. Also, thinking about documentation more generally, we don't have a docs site for the project. I was thinking about using the Python Sphinx documentation framework, but I hadn't really thought about it in depth yet. Just some ideas. It probably wouldn't be this sprint, but I was thinking of trying to really flesh out our documentation more. But for now, I'll work on the contributing docs. I think that's something I can follow up.
Justin, how about we assign the documentation part of it to Ramya to start with, because documentation is kind of on the easier side, and she'll kind of get some more time to study on the issues that are left on the front end part of it, like 55, 60, 110, and 12. Right. So we can kind of have documentation part of it done in the first sprint, and we can then jump on the remaining ones at the continuing sprints that may follow. What do you think?
I agree.
Got it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
So why don't we, since both you and I, Ramya, are working with, well, it's been like 4 years since I ran Mode. But since we're working with it for the first time, this would be a really good idea for both of us to also look at the contributing file.
Okay.
Make sure that it makes sense for someone who's new to the project. I think that's going to be really important.
Okay. Sounds good.
I can take a first pass on it, since you're also working on the development environment and the front end, the text wrapping issue. I'll try to work on this one sooner than later, hopefully, but by this week before the next following meeting. But it's something that I think we should work on together. And then once I'll open a new issue about long-term documentation plan. Figuring out that piece. We'll come back to that one.
Yeah. So we could get documentation, but the ticket that Akashdeep actually took has I have documented two paths. So if we could quickly read through that ticket, the creation of a container image, and decide that which path we would like to take. So I could provide Akashdeep some links on that, and he can work on it.
Sounds good to me. I'm just gonna go ahead and. Okay, so tell me, Nasir, which one of these paths would be, let's say, easy to start with?
Yeah, to be honest, these both are pretty simple and would be straightforward. तो कोई मसला नहीं होगा. Both would be pretty simple actually. So you would just have to write a Docker file would be the same in the both parts, but like in the part two, you would be writing a compose file, and in the part one, you would be writing a make file. So these both are pretty similar when it comes to the Docker layer, but to make it easier for the developer to interact with the Docker file and the Docker layer, you could write make file, just say make up linking it, so it will build the container image and make new. Which same goes for Docker compose. So it's just like a synthetic sugar upon the Docker file to make it
Right.
easy.
So yeah, if you just assume that you're running Arch, so which one of them, like the second one has Podman specified, and I think that Podman is kind of towards the Fedora side of it, you know. So
So if you are running Arch, so it's pretty simple to get Docker Compose in, and
okay,
the make utility is already there thanks to the GNU utils that you have installed. So
yeah,
it's already there.
right.
I
So
think
cool.
just
I
So
mean,
hmm.
yeah, Nasa, you can proceed.
So I was just thinking, like, if you'd like to get a make file, which is like you define make rules in it, like you just have to define two, and they are pretty simple, along with creating a YAML file for Docker Compose. So I would like to ask Justin, like he has some experience working on the ops side of things. So which one would you prefer, the make file one or the Docker Compose one?
so just to make sure I understand right, both of these require Docker files, right? The Docker Compose one would not have a Docker file. Um, my opinion is I like Docker Compose, especially when you have, I don't know if we still want to pursue the memcached part or if we just want to look at dropping that entirely, but I like how easy it is to add dependencies like memcached if I want, without installing that on my actual operating system. So my choice would be to have a Docker file for Mote, but use Docker Compose to actually automate and run that, because I think that's a tool that is generally well documented, is pretty popular, and I think it's just it's a good development tool. It really simplifies the running containers part, because you still have to depend on with this one, you still have to depend on having everything set up right with your Docker runtime. Docker Compose has some abstractions that make that a little less, for a new developer, it's just less tedious, I guess. So my opinion is I like Docker Compose or Podman Compose, one or the other.
That would be great. So yeah, like Docker Compose it is. So for Akashdeep to get started is to install Docker Compose, and for me personally, that I think about Docker Compose, it's like when you have multiple containers that you would like to interact with. So that's when I have worked on Docker Compose. But at my day job, when I was working on a small project, so I took the makefile and I thought would be just a random idea to get it with memcache. I think that's a little dependent on the on the issue that I'm working on. So once I figure that out, then it would be finished. So Akashdeep could still get started with the Docker file until I would figure out the config and the cache part. What do you think?
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Um, cool. So I'm just noticing we have about 8 minutes left before we have to wrap up. So the way things are looking, what's on the table for the next 2 weeks? So Nasir is finishing out the Flask port. Hopefully we'll have a pull request today or tomorrow. In the meantime, Nasir will follow up with the config.json bug with memcached during this sprint. Akash is going to work on the container image, as we just talked about with Docker Compose. Ramya and I will both be figuring out the development environment piece, which really will fit into that. And then Ramya is also going to work on the front end text wrapping bug, which will be more of a CSS task. So this is what we're looking at for the next 2 weeks. What we can figure out as we go, So the next week's meeting would be like a sprint check-in. We really wouldn't be trying to plan out a whole new sprint like we did today. We really be like following up on what we just talked about now. What we can figure out is maybe that'll be useful for us. Maybe it won't. Maybe we can meet every week. Maybe we meet every other week. We'll figure it out. But for now, we can go ahead and keep the calendar invite for next Sunday. And we'll have a chance to follow up and see how things are going on these issues, see if anyone needs help with anything, or if there's questions that we need to answer as a group. And then hopefully in 2 weeks, we can actually look at cutting a new release and getting some hype going on Mote development going again. So I think we've got a good action plan here. I feel good about everything. I'll just leave some time for open floor. If anyone has, I can go ahead and turn off my screen share here. If there's anything that anyone else wants to add or cover that we didn't talk about, now is a good time.
I have a question. So when we talk about installing the developing environment, is it this one? I just dropped a link in the chat.
So that link is to that's how Upstream Flask recommends it. In a rough way, that is how we're going to be doing it. Just a little differently. That'll be where the first pass I make on the contributing guidelines. That should help. That should help make that more clear. But for now, generally that's how it will work. We might have like Docker Compose or something else that gets added into that, but basically it's going to be how that works. And it looks like Nasir dropped a link into chat too.
I'd just like to add that while setting up the development environment, as long as you have pip env installed, so it's a tool that you can easily install with Vue if you are on Mac OS, and you just have to fork the repository, clone it, and just type pip env install and pip env pip env install. I documented that and now I forget. Pip env shell. So and then run Mote. So it'll be the memcached part would be a little tricky to figure out. I'm not sure what's the status of memcached on macOS, but if it's there, it would be simpler to set that up, or else the debugger is gonna not let you run the application, so it'll create some issues. So if there are any, feel free to ping me on IRC and we can figure some way out.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, first, once the contributing MD is kind of out there, that's when I should start work on the other issue, the wrapping up text thing, right? Because only then I'll be having the proper environment. That way. Okay.
Yeah, it's like with the Flask docs, pip env is just a wrapper for Python virtual environment. So it's just kind of like a layer of abstraction higher than what the pip env or what the Flask docs have written. Still using virtual environments, but we use pip env because it makes that management of virtual environments a little easier.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. Anything else before we wrap up? Going once. Going twice. Sold or meeting end or adjourned. Okay, folks. Well, thanks for spending your Sunday morning or Sunday night talking about Mote. We'll follow up next week with our meeting. I'll put some comments in the issues to summarize what we talked about. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us in the developer chat. So we'll follow up there. And
great.
That's all. Thanks all.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Have a good week. Bye.
Bye,
everyone. Best of luck for the Monday.
Yeah, we would need that. Bye, Nasir.
So, Akash, just one thing.
Yeah, sure.
As you are the last one here. तो आपके लिए मैं एक काम करता हूँ. I am gonna drop some Docker file 101 and
Yeah,
Docker
I could use some
compile
documentation
101.
as well. Yeah.
तो आपको कोई question हो, so do let me know. I'm gonna most probably gonna answer that, and like we can search together for something if there is any issues like which I cannot answer as well. ठीक है,
चलेगा.
तो
पहले
फिर
तो
मैं
आप
अब
मुझे रिसोर्सेज दीजिएगा कि कहाँ
हाँ,
से पढ़ना है, कहाँ से ये सीखना है. Because Docker is still something that I've only heard of कि हाँ Docker होता है, containerization is something that happens. So
yeah,
I would require the resources to start from, and
so
फिर
like
questions आए तो definitely आपसे पूछूंगा.
ठीक है. So resources में मैं आपको like link share करता हूँ. Along with that, just for a high level abstraction of what Docker is, you can just think of that as a Docker as a virtual machine जो कि जिसके लिए आपको एक hypervisor की जरूरत नहीं होती. But you are actually using the Linux kernel या तो जो आपके kernel की कुछ features हैं जहाँ पे आप उसको use करते हुए एक layer बना देते हैं, एक abstraction layer के for the आपके कंप्यूटर के प्रोसेस में दैट कंटे आपके होस्ट के प्रोसेस में दैट कंटेनर प्रोसेस इज रनिंग एज अ प्रोसेस. तो कंटेनर के अंदर बैश अगर एज अ प्रोसेस आईडी 1 चल रहा है एंड विद योर ऑन योर होस्ट मशीन दैट वुड बी सम अदर. सो इट्स जस्ट लाइक a way of abstracting all of that, and like you can create a more reproducible build with stuff like जहाँ पे आपको like manually आपको पता है कि बेस ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम ये है, आपने उसको डॉकराइज कर दिया या तो कंटेनराइज कर दिया.
मैंने
So
ये चीज यहाँ पे ट्राई की थी. व्हाट डू यू कॉल इट, ch root environment, you know what that is, right? So वहाँ पे I had this. Do you know that recording is still running? It's in the top right corner.
oh yeah,
Oh, so is there any
कोई
way of
बात
stopping